On the first page of your workbook, you'll see a list of key terms and words that we're going to learn over the next few weeks. You might know some of them already. By the end of this unit, you'll know all of them, and you'll be able to define each one. The first definition, if you go to lesson 1, what is politics? In the first box it says, what does politics mean to you? So you're going to write your own definition in that box below. What does politics mean to you? While you're writing, I'll play some music. When the music stops, we'll move on to the next section. Here's a dictionary definition that you can use to update your own definition. Politics is from the Greek word which means affairs of the cities, and politics is the set of activities that are associated with making decisions in groups or other forms of power relations among individuals, such as the distribution of resources or status. So just update your definition with those key terms in bold. Now we're going to look at the 4 main types of political system, and these are the 4 types that you see on a regular basis, and they are democracy, monarchy, oligarchy, and authoritarian political systems. If you see a word that ends in archy or crazy, then you will now know that it stems from the Greek root archein, which means to rule. So if you have a word ending in archy or crazy, it's something to do with ruling and leadership. So theocracy, meritocracy, aristocracy, for example. In Britain, as you know, we live under a form of monarchy. And monarchy is a form of government in which the state is ruled by an individual who typically inherits the throne by birth or claims it through a power struggle. And that individual rules for life or until their abdication if they choose to step down from the throne. It's important to note that the British monarchy is known as a constitutional monarchy, and we'll look at this in future lessons, but effectively what that means is, while the Queen is officially the head of state, the ability to make and pass legislation, laws, resides with the elected Parliament. So it's not an absolute monarchy, it is a constitutional monarchy. An oligarchy is quite different. This is a form of power structure in which power effectively rests with a small number of people. So an oligarchy is literally, it means rule by the few. And these few people can be distinguished by royalty, by wealth, by family ties, by education, or sometimes by military control. So an oligarchy is a form of power structure, it's a form of government in which power rests with a small number of people. In an authoritarian system of government, all of the power rests with one central individual, or sometimes one central single party. The key difference between this system and an oligarchy is that under authoritarian rule, the people who are being ruled over have no power at all. They have no freedom and they have no power to change things. They often don't get the vote. They aren't allowed to express their own opinions or take any political action. And often the authoritarian leadership will suppress any sort of action or comment by their people through either violence or other ways of control, for example, control of state media. So an authoritarian system is a system in which one person or one entity holds all the power and nobody else can do very much about it. A democracy, therefore, is on paper the absolute opposite of authoritarian political systems, and that is because, as you know, in a democracy, the whole population, or all the eligible people in the population, are able to have their say, are able to take their vote, and are therefore able to influence government of the country. In your workbook, there is a table that asks you to write down your definitions of monarchy, oligarchy, democracy, and authoritarian political systems. So just take a moment to write down your definitions. You can work with the people around you if you wish. Brilliant. So the next section in your workbook asks you to think about the definitions of direct democracy and representative democracy. So as you're listening, you could be making some notes in your workbook in the appropriate box. So there are different types of democracy, and you'll know this from things you've experienced in your life. Direct democracy is what we call a literal single vote from every single person in the political system. So direct democracy means you are asked a question and you give your answer, and everybody who is eligible, everyone who's able, gives their answer. That's what we call direct democracy. Direct democracy is seen in things such as referendums, and a referendum is basically a question. It's a vote that is put to the people that everybody gets to answer. For example, the referendum that was held to decide whether or not we would leave the European Union. That was an example of direct democracy, in that every single person got to have their individual say if they chose to cast their vote. Now, direct democracy is quite a rare thing, because if you think about it, if a government was to ask the people in the country whether they agreed or not every time they made a decision, things would take an awfully long time to get done. It's not the most efficient way of working when you're ruling over an entire nation. Direct democracy works much better in smaller groups. So you'll do frequently in lessons and in clubs and in your friendship groups, you'll have who thinks we should do this, who thinks we should do that. That's direct democracy. Everybody gets a say. In a political system that has to rule over a lot of people, we have what's called representative democracy. So we still get our say, but our say is limited to who represents us in government. So rather than having our say on every single thing that is done, every law that is passed, we have a say on who gets to talk about those laws and represent us in Parliament. So that person in red that you can see there, they are our members of Parliament, our MPs, and they are the people who we elect through our vote, and we're there at the bottom, the blue people. We elect our representative and they go off to Parliament and represent our views. Just before we look at voting systems, in our workbooks there are two boxes there that ask you to write down your definition of direct democracy and your definition of representative democracy, and it asks you to give an example of both. So again, you can work with the people around you if you wish. I'll play some music, and when the music stops, we'll have a look at different voting systems. So before we start, we need to look at a key term, which is candidate, or candidate, as you would say in America. Now, a candidate is somebody who is seeking an appointment. They're seeking to be given either a job or a place in office. So you would have candidates for jobs. They want the job. You would have candidates for election. They want to be elected into Parliament. Now, the word has a fascinating etymology. It comes from the Latin root candor, which means to shine. So candidate comes from the same place as candle, as chandelier, as incandescent, as frankincense, because it means to shine. And the reason for that is because in ancient Rome, the people who were putting themselves forward for positions of power, the candidates, were typically dressed in togas, as they would be. But what they did was they used white chalk to make their togas shine even brighter than everybody else's. So the candidates were kind of defined by their bright, shining white attire. So it's very cool etymology. So our first political voting system, you're going to have a go at these in a minute, but the system we use in this country is called first past the post, and it is what it sounds like. If you have a race, the first person past the post is the winner. So what happens in this voting system is the candidates, all the people who want to be elected, are listed on paper, and the voters, that's you and I, place a cross next to the candidate they wish to elect. And then what happens is all the votes are put into a box, and then they are counted, and the candidate with the most votes wins. So very simple. You put a cross next to the candidate you want to elect, and the one with the most votes wins. Just have a little discussion about what the potential pros and cons are of a system like that. What's good about it, but what could be seen to be a negative effect of first past the post voting. Just have a little discussion. A good analogy for exploring some of the criticisms of first past the post that some people hold is that in a race, in a literal race, you have a winner, you have a second and third, and the winner obviously gets the gold medal, the second gets the silver, the third gets the bronze. So here you've got Usain Bolt in the semi-final of the 100 metres in Rio, and he's beating Andre de Grasse and Trayvon Bromell. Now, if you translate those three runners into political parties, if you voted for Usain Bolt party, brilliant, you've won the election. If you voted for Trayvon and Andre, you get nothing, because there is no silver or bronze position in first past the post political voting. So all of those people who voted for Trayvon or Andre do not have Trayvon or Andre representing them in Parliament. And in a representative democracy, that's why we vote. So you've got Usain Bolt or nobody. That's one of the criticisms of first past the post. One way around this is what is called the alternative vote, or single transferable vote. Now, these are two separate systems, but they mean effectively the same thing. What happens under AV is the candidates are listed on paper again, but instead of putting an X next to the name of one individual, voters put the candidates in order of preference, and you have to number them 1, 2, 3, 4. So to win under this system, a candidate needs 50% of the first preference votes. But if they don't have 50%, then what happens is the last place candidate is removed, and then the second votes for that candidate are redistributed among the remaining candidates until 50% is reached. So what that means is, at present, it might be that Usain has 40% of the vote, Andre has 30, Trayvon has 20. The last placed runner will be eliminated, but the second votes and third votes and fourth votes will be redistributed. Now maybe the people who wanted the last place person to win, maybe they put Trayvon as their second choice, which would therefore potentially boost Trayvon's vote to allow him to take the lead over Usain. And that continues until somebody reaches 50% and then they win the vote. The final system for voting that we're going to have a look at is proportional representation. Now, its supporters claim that proportional representation is the only democratic system of voting that there is. That's because PR, proportional representation, makes it possible for parties, political parties, to be elected proportionally. For example, if 55% of the votes are for Party A, then 55% of the seats in government will be designated to Party A. This is done in countries such as Finland, Latvia, Sweden, Brazil, Russia, the Ukraine, and South Africa. Now it's time to cast your vote. So in your workbook, there are 4 fictional school-based political parties, and your job now is to vote for your choice under the 3 systems we've looked at. So you're going to, for first past the post, you're going to put an X in the box next to the party you want to win. For proportional representation, you're going to do the same thing, put an X in the box next to the party you want to win. And then finally, for AV, or alternative vote, you're going to put the parties in order of preference, so number them 1 to 4. What we'll then do is collect up your results, and then we'll show you next session what the impact is of these different systems. So the 4 fictional parties, as you'll see, are the No Homework Party, the Free Food Party, the 4-Day Week Party, and the No School Party. So now is your opportunity to place your vote. So that was your first citizenship lesson, in which we asked the question, what is politics? Here is a recap quiz. We'll have one of these at the end of each lesson. 4 questions to go through with your form tutor. The answers are all on the worksheet that you've just completed. Once you've done that, if you go back to the table of keywords and terms on the first page of your workbook, you can now fill in democracy and politics with your new updated definitions. Next time we will look at the question and answer the question, what is sovereignty?